Good morning, YouTubers. I've had a few questions about the images in my backdrops on the layout. So this is a quick video on the process that I use. It mainly involves using PowerPoint to do most of the photoshopping. Just first, a couple of things. Beware of copyrights, obviously, when you're using any images off the internet. Most of what I'm showing you is stuff that I've either purchased or photographs I've taken myself and used on the layout backdrop. You can also get a lot of free images like signage and company logos on the internet that are royalty free, as you probably know. The first image that I get a lot of questions about is what I call the infinity road on my 3-track grade crossing. So where the road appears to be going off into the distance in the backdrop. So let's talk about that. Start by finding an image you like, an image that works for the scene that you're trying to create. You can either purchase these. I've even seen people paint them. The best way, in my opinion, is to take a photograph of the prototypical area that you're modeling. In my case, this one happened to fit what I needed. Then in PowerPoint, I just crop the photo. So I take out the areas that I don't want to waste printer ink on, and this is where you can size the image and print it out to make sure the colors come out the way you want it. Once I've cropped the image, I Photoshop it typically in PowerPoint. And in this case, I didn't want the crossbucks, nor did I want the phone poles in the image. So I just copied areas of foliage in the picture and pasted them over those things I didn't want, and voila, they're gone. So you can use PowerPoint just like you would use a photoshopping type software. There's quite a bit you can do with PowerPoint once you get familiar with it. You can just cut the image out. A lot of guys will use like an X-Acto knife or a razor blade. I like to use small, sharp scissors because it just makes it easier for me to get around the little nooks and crannies at the tops of the trees. And PowerPoint also lets you invert the image. So if you decide you want it to be in the opposite orientation, you can grab the whole image and invert it. So here's what it looks like on the layout. If the camera was a bit over to the right, it probably would look a little more accurate, but I think it looks good. The color contrast is on purpose. So you can see I've painted the asphalt, the dark asphalt color, and then that image is lighter on the wall. Now I did hit it with some black pigment powder, but I like the contrast because it appears as though as it goes off into the distance into that field, it's getting a lot of sunlight on it, so it's lighter. Um, if it was painted the same color of the road that you see on the layout, it'd be a bit monotone. So sometimes having some contrast is nice in your backdrops with color. So let's talk also about buildings and industries in the backdrop. I've had a few questions about how I created those. This is the old brick warehouse that's to the left of the overpass on my layout. It's the most predominant, one of the most predominant images. So I wanted it to be good quality high res, and I wanted it to be larger because it was meant to be at the forefront to give the illusion that it's closer in. The only thing I did to alter the picture is I added that sandy cement color base, and I do that to most of my structures in the backdrop so that if they peek above the baseboard, you don't see that white paper. Here is the warehouse on the layout. So again, it's to the left of the overpass, and I purposely overlapped that smaller building in the background as well as overlapping the trees coming off Infinity Road. So that gives that impression that the brick building is closer to the forefront and larger. It's important to think about using forced perspective so that things in the backdrop don't look just flat. You can create the illusion of 3 dimensions even on a 2-dimensional surface. This is another structure I use. It's the kind of the slummy apartment. I printed it sideways so that I get the height I need. I also added that base that you saw with the brick building. And here it is on the layout to the right of the overpass. You can see that it's larger than the background buildings. And there's also a road between that apartment and those smaller buildings in the background. So it sort of offsets those smaller buildings, again, giving that illusion that there's some depth to the backdrop. This backdrop scene sits between the Province and Worcester headquarters on my layout and the Ballard Printing and Publishing building, the blue building. It's really a collage of many different images that I had, so I wanted to give some variety. I added a road at the base, you can see there, so that offsets that scene, and I'll show you how that interplays with the parking lot at the blue printing facility on the layout. Here it is on the layout, and you can see that road and how it butts up against the parking lot or the driveway that's coming off that blue printing facility. So it appears that those trucks, when they pull out or pull in, they would be going out onto that road in the backdrop. And again, like the Infinity Road, there's a bit of color contrast between the road on the layout and the road in the backdrop, which I think adds some nice variation. This is the scene that goes between that blue printing facility and the Bombachi food facility to the right. And it's a collage as well. Some of the buildings on the right are from a different scene than the buildings on the left. And these buildings also have a slightly different look to them than the prior scene. So it's good to mix up as neighborhoods change and as you move across the town, you don't have all the same buildings. That gives more of a prototypical look. So let's take a look at it on the layout. And there it is on the layout. So similar to the prior scene, it appears that those trucks would be pulling out onto that road between the layout and the actual buildings in the backdrop. And there's that color variation between the pavement on the layout and the pavement on the road. All right, now let's talk about landscape backdrops. These are probably a little less complicated in some ways, but I'll show you some different images that I used and then how I put them together on the layout. There's a million images of foliage and trees available to purchase, available online. You could take photographs of the prototypical area, usually the best option. So I used bits of this. I believe bits of this one. I like the way the sun interplays with the trees. These pine trees I used at the end of the layout where I have that hidden mirror. I'll show you that. They're sideways just to get the height when I printed them, similar to what I did with the slummy apartment. Here's an example of what the trees look like on the layout. On the left, that is next to or on the side of the Bombachi food facility. So behind that tank car, you see a cluster of trees, and it's multiple different trees. So probably from each of those three images I showed you on the prior slides, I cut them out and overlap them. So you give an illusion of depth and a variation in color. In the middle and to the right are the pine trees, the tall pine trees I use. So it makes it appear that those freestanding trees are actually morphing into a larger full-grown pine forest. All right, let's move to photos of building walls. So I don't like when buildings abruptly end against the backdrop. Usually when you have a smaller switching layout, you end up having to cut your buildings in half or even shorter than that. So to really give the illusion that they continue into the backdrop, I use photographs of the building walls and incorporate those into the backdrop. So let's take a look at that. This is the Ballard Printing and Publishing facility. So I just take a panel of the actual structure. This is a Walthers kit, and I take a photograph of it. I took a photograph of the wall panel and a photograph of the foundation, and then I piece that together on the backdrop. So the challenge here is getting the sizing right and then getting the color right, because no two printers are the same, and the things look different on PowerPoint than they actually do when you print them out, and the cameras vary the color. when you get the printout under the LED lights on the layout, it looks different than if you're looking at them at the kitchen table, for example. So you got to do a bit of playing around, a bit of trial and error. But once you figure out that formula, it gets easier. Um, Putting the camera straight on is key, so you don't get a warped image. There are ways to correct that. If you know how to do photoshopping, you can make it square and kind of rotate it, but try to get a photograph straight on. And this is what it looks like on the layout. So you can see that I weathered it so that it really blends in with the actual structure. And it gives a nice illusion that the building doesn't just stop dead on the wall. It continues into the background scene. I put a styrene gutter on it as well, so that it gives it more of an illusion of 3 dimensions, and some roof features. And I'll talk about how I did the roof features. These are 2 different size walls from the Bombachi food plant, and they're actual photographs of those walls. Again, you got to play around with the colors to make sure it actually matches when you stick it on the wall. And here's how I used it. So this is the half overpass on the wall, the right side of the layout, where I have the hidden mirror. And in the mirror, it captures that Bombachi food facility. So to deal with that, I put photographs of the Bombachi food facility on the wall under that overpass, so it appears that the building continues out that way under the overpass. So when you look in the mirror and you see it, it kind of matches what you're seeing on the wall there. And like the prior printing facility, I weathered those images when I put them on the wall, so it really makes it appear to be more real. These are images I took of the northeast distribution and cold storage wall, complete with dirt on the bottom. And this shows you how the color can vary dramatically. I put them in there just to show you. You can alter the color in PowerPoint. You double click on it and you can play around with the characteristics of the photo, and that's how you alter the color. It takes some tweaking and some trial and error and some learning, but you can pretty much get right on the color once you learn how your printer interprets the photographs. That's the biggest variable, is the printer. So on the layout, this is how the distribution and cold storage appears to continue off into the backdrop. I have that one section of wall that's the photograph, and it's weathered to like the building with some roof features. This is an image of the wall from the Province and Worcester Regional Headquarter facility. And that building is actually a kit bash from the distribution and cold storage building, so a very similar wall. And here it is on the layout. So I added the styrene gutter, and there's also a styrene roof trim. And you can see I created a styrene door with a no parking sign on it. So those elements, as well as that roof feature, give it some additional detail. It makes it pop. All right, so let's talk about photos of structural details, including those roof features. These are photographs of the side railings, the concrete barriers along the edge of the Rick's Bridge kit. So I took photographs of those and just duplicated them on this page. And that allowed me to make the missing section of the half bridge, if you will. So on that back wall where the hidden mirror is, I had to cut the bridge in half. And so if you're looking at it, to make it appear like there is another half, I just cut out those pictures of the actual side railings and stuck them on the wall there. And again, I had to play around with sizing and color to get them right. But you could simply paint that on there if you wanted to as well. But it's easier for me to take a photograph and then cut it out, stick it on the wall. Roof details. So you saw the roof details on a lot of those building walls that were on the backdrops. So the same way that I capture the building walls, I actually take a photograph of the roof features. So I went up to each of the buildings that had roof features that were already painted and somewhat weathered and got the camera as straight as I could, took a picture of it, and then resized it on this page here. And there's varying sizes because depending on how far off in the distance the image is, that dictates how large or small you're going to want the roof features. So let's look at how I use those on the layout. So top left, the brick warehouse. You can see there's an AC unit and a vent. Top right, the apartment building, and that's the P&W regional headquarter building. So there's a chimney on the apartment, a vent on the HQ. And then bottom left, that's the distribution and cold storage. So there's an HVAC unit and a chimney, and then the printing facility. Similar details. So that really adds another dimension to the images, not just flat tops. And you can never, in my opinion, have too many roof details. It really brings things to life. Vehicles. So I did actually use this on that half bridge to make it appear that there was a car on the other side. And it actually, one of my subscribers called it out. I had to agree with him. It didn't look quite right. So I took that off. So I do listen to my subscribers. Um, the, the Similar to the walls and the concrete barriers, I just took photographs of actual vehicles and then I tweaked the size, trial and error, printed out until it looked about HO. I haven't used these. I'm thinking about using them in different places, but just wanted to show you that it is possible to do this. And obviously the size of the vehicle is contingent upon how far or close it's going to be in the backdrop. Signs and graffiti. Got to have signs and graffiti. These are some examples of what you can use. In the middle, those are very small Province and Worcester logos, and they're very small because I sized them to be HO scale when they print out. And then on the bottom, those are examples. There's so many different types of graffiti. And the nice thing about graffiti is it's not necessarily a scale thing. I mean, it's up to the artist. If they want to paint a large graffiti, they do that. If they want to paint a small one, they do that. So you can really, there's more freedom of sizing with graffiti than something like a P&W logo. Here's an example of how I use the logos. So the maintenance away vehicle on the left has a P&W logo. The beautiful Caprice Classic has a P&W logo. And those, I need to do some dull coat, something to hide the edges of the decal. I printed those on decal paper, and I'll talk about that in a second. Graffiti. So under the overpass, some graffiti on this railbox car, some graffiti, and that railbox car as well needs to be probably dull coated so I can blend in the edges of the graffiti decals. And I'm going to do some more weathering, some washes and whatnot on that car. So I'll deal with that at that time. There's some various signs that I've used across the layout. If you're from Connecticut, you might recognize that yellow sign on the lower left. Here's an example of how they look on the layout. So that vehicle on the left is a work in progress, but that's the intent, is to have that be a city fish market truck. And on the right is a waste management dumpster, so it's fully weathered and rusty. But that waste management logo and the no parking sign were images that I found online and printed them on decal paper. This is the fence. In a prior video post, I talked about how I built that fence. So you can see I used these are the signs that you see on those fence gates are printed on just regular paper, and they're stuck on there with glue sticks. So 2 warning signs and a no trespassing sign. Here's a nice example of how you can create logos for your buildings. So the ADM sign is on the ADM transload facility, obviously, and the Province and Worcester logo is on the regional headquarter building about in the middle of the layout. And the ADM is printed on self-sticky label paper, and the P&W is just regular paper stuck on there with glue stick. Those I need to dress up. The ADM will need to get dull coated and weathered and a little bit better blended, but nice crisp graphics. And those came off the internet. Let's talk about creating logos. So in my case, I used PowerPoint to create a logo for my layout, and I posted a video on that. So you just start out with all the images that you think you'd want in a logo and get them in PowerPoint, and then you piece them together and you can size them and adjust the color. This is ultimately what I ended up with. This is the logo for my layout, New England Industrial Division. And that's just taking images into PowerPoint and rearranging them and using some PowerPoint shapes like the circles and tweaking the colors. And that image in the center is one of my engines. It's the GP38 2007. And in PowerPoint, you can take an image like that and you can stylize it. And you can see that that's kind of stylized. You just double click on it and it gives you a bunch of options on how to play around with the look of the photo. So I like that so much, I actually had it sent to Sticker Mule, and I'm going to make 3-inch stickers of that layout logo. So another example of some cool stuff you can do using PowerPoint. Some quick tips on how to apply the images and the signs that you create. One, you can print it on regular printer paper or on cardstock paper and then cut it out and stick it with a glue stick. So most of the images that you saw in the backdrop, like the trees, the building walls, the buildings off in the distance, I just printed those on regular white printer paper, cut them out, and then stuck them to the wall with glue stick. Rubber cement I used in the past. It's messy. It's difficult to take off. And over time, it'll actually peel away. The edges will peel away. So glue stick works great. And if you want to take it off, unless you use permanent, which I don't, if you want to take it off, you just wet it and it comes right off the wall and you can clean the glue off. Another way is printing it on adhesive paper. So the same paper that you use for labels with a self-stick back. So an example of that is the ADM logo that you saw on the ADM facility that's on sticky paper. And then the third is printing on clear or white water slide decal paper. And I didn't realize you could even do this till recently. You can buy on Amazon clear decal paper or white decal paper. If you're printing anything that has white, I didn't realize this either, that printers don't print white. It's actually, white is an absence of color in the printer. And my wife told me that, and it was a great revelation to me. So if you have a decal you want to produce that has white in it, you use the white decal paper. If it's colors or black font and you need a clear background, you print on the clear decal paper. So these are available for not that much money on Amazon. The only thing I would say is once you print them, make sure the print ink dries. So give it a bit of time to dry. And then I hit it with a light spray of dull coat. And what that does is that prevents the ink from smudging off the decal paper when you're handling it or when you're applying it. But the waste management logo and the no parking sign on the dumpster and then no parking sign that was on one of the doors in the backdrop, those are some examples of how I used water slide decal printer paper. Also, the Province of Worcester logos on the vehicles. So that's it. That pretty much explains how I got all the imagery on the layout. A couple summary points. To me, it's definitely more enjoyable to make these myself versus buying them. It saves you money generally. I mean, you have to spend money on printer ink and decal paper, but overall, I think it saves money. But the real motivation for me is the customizability. If you're modeling a freelance railroad, you can make the logo, print it. You can't typically buy things that are mass produced with signage that you want. So, for example, that city fish market truck, I gotta do that myself. So it's the customizability that really makes it enjoyable. The sizing and colors take a bit of trial and error, like I mentioned, but once you figure that out, that formula, it makes it a lot easier. Last thing is just be mindful of copyrights. So hopefully that was helpful to you and useful. And as always, please like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. Thanks.